Siblings of sociopaths or narcissists. When did you realize your sibling wasn't normal? Story 1. My oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and we grew up fairly poor, so both parents were out of the home a lot, working to give us the basics. Because of this, my oldest sister looked after us. My earliest memories involve me running through the kitchen in a diaper, feeling so scared, trying to get away from her. Anything and everything set her off. If attention was not 100% on her, she would flip out, scratching, kicking, hair pulling. My parents were pretty oblivious to all this, or rather my dad was also unstable, BPD and frequently off medication, and my mom was too emotionally mistreated to do anything to help. She had to have presents on everyone else's birthday and had to have the same or better presents than everyone else on Christmas. As I was 4 years younger, I was much smaller than her and easy to catch. From my toddler years to 16, I had crescent scars all over my arms and ankles because she would dig her nails into my skin, drawing blood. The very first time it clicked in my head that no one would ever help and she could manipulate her way out of everything was when she stabbed me in the shoulder with a pen. I was about 8 years old. She had yanked out a chunk of my hair, so I told her to get away from me. The look on her face was horrifying because she looked so happy. My dad had been sleeping and woke up to me saying something he considered unacceptable. She knew I was going to be in trouble, so she grabbed the pen off the table, stabbed me, and then yanked it back out. I ran upstairs to get away from my dad, which was a whole different frightening experience, and he wouldn't believe she had hurt me. I came downstairs a few hours later when he allowed it, with blood all over my shirt. My aunt was staying with us and saw it, pointed it out to my dad, and they still believed my sister hadn't done it. I gave up all hope for help after that. That turned into 8 years of her scarring any exposed skin, pulling out my hair, cornering me and screaming about how awful I was, taking every moment to remind me I was overweight. She had struggled with anorexia and bulimia most of her teens and adult life, throwing things at me, telling me men would only like me for the wrong reasons, and more. I am more of an extrovert than most of my family, so I always had a lot of friends and boyfriends in elementary school, and then actual boyfriends in high school. When she went away to university, my mother thought it would be a great idea for me to visit her there. A whole weekend being alone in her dorm with her. She spent the first day reminding me how awful I was, then acted nice until the evening. She wanted me to watch West Side Story, I think. It's the one with the opening scene of 2 groups snapping their fingers down the street. Me being 16, thought it was funny, so I laughed. Wrong move. She started screaming, threw out all the food, cornered me, and told me no one in my life actually liked me. I would only ever be in unhealthy relationships. I didn't deserve better. I would always be disgusting, and so on. Then she kicked me out and made our mother pick me up a day early. Mid-year she was home, and in a rare moment of civility, she wanted to talk. She asked me how you're supposed to feel sorry for other people, as in, how do you feel empathy? She said she couldn't figure it out when her professors talked about it. I carefully got out of that conversation. Later that day, after her usual, "you're awful" rant, I decided to turn my back on her and not engage. She picked up a textbook and hit me as hard as she could over the head with it, yanked me by the back of my head and pushed me into the cupboards, telling me, "You're not allowed to ignore me." I have not spoken to her since that day. I'm now 26 and she's 30. She's still living off my mother and has no social skills. The last time I saw her, she had drunk a bottle of wine on Christmas Eve 2011 and just lay on the living room floor the whole day. She's pulled a knife on our other sister, been evicted for damaging apartments in my mother's name, had many pets die under questionable circumstances, expects constant gifts and attention, gets angry if family pay more attention to children than to her, still calls our mother Mummy in a high-pitched voice, cannot maintain friendships, has never had a romantic relationship, and still resents me for being able to have relationships. I wouldn't be surprised if she seriously harmed someone one day. She is the spitting image of our father in personality. She lives in another province from me, is still in school, and my mother is wise enough to never let her know where I live. Those close to me know who she is and not to share any information. Story 2. My older brother isn't just troubled, he's dangerous. Even my parents are surprised he isn't in jail for serious crimes yet. He's been aggressive for as long as I can remember, beating us as kids for imagined slights, and even once knocking our disabled dad unconscious. He's been arrested multiple times, and after the most recent arrest, when customs stopped weapons he ordered from overseas, a police officer came to my mom's house a few days later and asked if she knew he might have mental health issues. She said yes, but didn't think anyone would dare tell him that. The officer agreed. His latest pastime is walking the streets with a signal jammer while people are trying to make calls, or using it outside the fire or police station. He finds it hilarious. He was banned from a local grocery store for threatening a staff member for supposedly looking at him. And that's not even close to the worst things he's done to our family. Story 3. I realized my sister wasn't normal and was extremely self-centered when everything about my wedding had to revolve around her. She made life miserable. My friends were shocked at her behavior, and I finally had to acknowledge that her actions were ruining special occasions. If she didn't get her way, I'd face a stream of cruel insults. We're about 3.5 years apart, and I'm the oldest. She's the middle child. She has no empathy, never apologizes, just says the most hurtful things and moves on as if I deserved it. She has the temper of a child, explodes often, and then makes everyone feel sorry for her. Now that I'm pregnant, it's only gotten worse. I've had to remove her from my life because it's one of the most toxic relationships I've ever experienced. That's when I truly realized she might have serious narcissistic tendencies. Story 4. Where to begin? I think I noticed long before our parents did. Either they didn't want to see the truth to avoid the pain, or they both worked long hours, and I spent a lot of time alone with my younger brother. One day I came home from my after-school job and saw him standing over a big fire he had lit in our front yard. I calmly asked him to put it out, worried about the garden and my family's rose bushes, the last plant from my grandfather. He didn't respond, but minutes later he followed me upstairs and physically attacked me. That was the first of many violent incidents. Others included throwing a knife, kicking our 60-year-old father in the stomach, running away, threatening to harm himself, and developing paranoid delusions about people trying to harm him and the family dog. Our parents only accepted the grim reality much later. He is the reason I first left home. Sleeping with a locked door still didn't make me feel safe. I still worry I might one day get a terrible phone call saying he has harmed our parents. Story 5. She's 2 years older than me. When I was 3, she convinced me to pile as many blankets as possible on our sleeping little brother until our mom returned. I'll never forget my mom's reaction when I excitedly told her about our prank. Luckily, he was okay. When I was about 7, our daring little brother climbed high up a tall evergreen tree and got stuck. I tried convincing him to hold on while I got our parents. My sister started shaking the tree and chanting, "Fall, fall, fall." He fell and landed on his back. My sister ran away and my brother was unconscious for several terrifying seconds before he finally opened his eyes and was fine. I was shocked to discover my sister hadn't told anyone. There were many things like this. She was cruel to us, especially me, since I'm also female, and enjoyed causing me distress. These 2 moments are the only times I can look back and think she actually wanted to cause serious harm. Over the years, I became haunted by memories of her cruelty, like when she forced me to destroy my artwork, and my parents denied her wrongdoing, while making me obey her every demand. I once even had to leave a movie theater because I couldn't stop thinking about it. What makes her truly manipulative is how she pretended to be nice, lied easily, and felt no guilt. I was about 16 when I finally refused to take the blame for something she had done. She was skilled at making herself look like the victim and convincing me I should take the fall because I supposedly wouldn't get in as much trouble. Story 6. I am 22 and my half-sister is 27. One day she invited me to lunch, which was unusual because she never really shows interest in how I'm doing. I asked her what was wrong and why she wanted to meet, and she said, "Nothing. I just want to have lunch with you." We arrived and she waited until after the meal to tell me that my dad, not her biological father, had been arrested 2 days earlier because of an addiction to harmful substances. I'm currently on medication that can cause seizures if I drink alcohol with it, and for my 22nd birthday, her present to me was a large bottle of wine. When my brother-in-law saw the embarrassment and sadness on my face, he asked why I reacted that way. I told him about my medication, and he was shocked because my sister had never told him. From the moment she handed me the bag, she laughed to herself like it was the funniest thing in the world. When we were younger, my sister and I shared a room. We had a metal-framed bunk bed, and she once lifted the mattress of the bottom bunk and told me to look under it. Being the 7-year-old I did. As soon as I stuck my head under, she let the mattress drop with full force on the back of my head, making my face hit the metal bars. I started bleeding, and after I got out, I ran to my mom. My sister found it hilarious. We also shared a bathroom, and once she locked me out, refusing to let me in. My parents' bathroom was off limits, so I stood there begging while she laughed even harder when I ended up having an accident. When she was in middle school, my parents let her go to the movies with friends if she took me along. They bought tickets for the Santa Claus 2, 2002, but then went into another theater to watch Ghost Ship. I stayed until a disturbing scene came on and told her I wanted to leave, but she refused. She told me to go watch the Santa Claus 2 alone. While alone in that theater, a man tried to talk to me and wouldn't leave until I loudly refused and ran to a manager. On the way home, she made me promise not to tell our parents, but I was so scared that I broke down and cried when my mom asked about the movie. I was 8 years old at the time. My parents didn't help me pay for college because she had dropped out. They didn't help me get a car or learn to drive because she had used the one they gave her for reckless behavior. Now I don't talk to my family because they treat me like I'm the problem, while my sister is seen as the angel with the perfect life. Story 7. My little sister may not have an official diagnosis, but she's been not right since at least age 4. For context, she's 9 years younger than me. One day when she was 5 and I was babysitting her, we were laughing together when she suddenly said, "I'm going to hurt you and hide you where mom and dad can't find you," before smiling and walking away. I told my parents, but they dismissed it. From then on, she would start small fights with me, or sometimes pin me by the throat to the wall and hit me. She's been almost twice my weight and taller than me since she was 10. Then she'd cry and tell my parents I hit her, and she'd be delighted when they punished me, even though I never touched her. Every conversation she has seems calculated, as if she's acting for an audience. She never apologizes sincerely. I'm her half-sister, and when she found out, she mocked me constantly until my mom told her to apologize. I said I only wanted it if it was sincere, and later she told me I'd never get a genuine apology from her because she never feels sorry for hurting others. There's more, but that's what stands out most. Story 8. My sister once tried to give me an illness. I live in a much nicer home than she does. I've known her for almost 40 years, and her behavior follows patterns that I can now recognize. She'll have a good period, spending time with her kids, getting along with her ex, cleaning her home, looking for work, and during that time, she tells me how much she loves me. Then she starts to get disappointed when things don't go her way. Before she becomes depressed, she gets angry. During this phase, I'm a frequent target because I won't give her money. She becomes verbally abusive, saying, "You both think you're so much better than me." When she's winding down from one of these episodes, she'll sometimes act calm and talk nonstop for hours. But if she thinks I'm judging her, she blows up and becomes destructive. She's stolen things, damaged my property, and focused on whatever I have that she doesn't. Or in this case, something she has that I don't, a certain infection. She's tried to harm me before, like serving me food that had gone bad, or attempting to give me medication without my consent. Recently, I noticed things moved in my bathroom and suspected she was up to something. When I checked, I found the box of sanitary products had been emptied and refilled in a suspicious way. Story 9. I first realized my sister was deeply manipulative when she got caught cheating at school, and when asked why she hadn't studied, claimed it was because our dad had been hurting her. This led to Child Protective Services getting involved, but they found no evidence of harm. Then she claimed she wasn't a virgin because her brother had hurt her. 2 of my brothers were ruled out immediately, leaving me as the target. Unaware of the accusation, I visited her every day for a week at the facility she'd been sent to, trying to be a good brother. Later, I learned they had been observing me, but eventually concluded the story was false. I had never even kissed a girl at that point. 15 years later, I refused to be alone in a room with her. I know she has made similar accusations against dozens of others, either for attention or to escape difficult situations, without any remorse for the damage she causes. Story 10. My brother always seemed different. When we were little, he made up this game called Joey and the Wimp, which was really just boys wrestling. But it wasn't just ordinary wrestling. It was all about power and control. He would have his forearm pressing down on my neck and whisper things like, "Someday I'm going to hurt you, and nobody will do anything about it because I'll plead insanity." He would also talk about how he would harm me in my sleep. I have woken up a few times and found him just standing there in the dark, looking at me. Once my dad caught him in the middle of the night getting a kitchen knife. He said, "I have to hurt me." He was 6 years old at the time. At 16, he and his unstable friend carried out a home invasion on me and my friend. I had to go to the hospital afterward. He attacked our mother, breaking her arm, and I suspect she was injured in a way that made it hard for her to sit for a while. Then he was going to stab me. I got chased half a mile through the woods until he tripped and I managed to get away. He was planning to shoot my dad when he was 17. He said he borrowed the gun from a neighbor. I saw it. It was a .38. A couple of friends talked him out of it. He has been on disability since he was maybe 20. I don't know for sure. I stopped interacting with him when I went to college many years ago. To this day, I suspect he might try to follow through on his desire to hurt me, believing he could get away with it by claiming insanity. It has been years, but even just the other night, I had a dream that he was trying to harm me. I do not like knowing that someday I may have to defend myself against him. Story 11. My mother is a narcissist. She was mistreated constantly by her brother growing up, who I'm pretty convinced is a sociopath. However, she has always had to be in control of everything. She is never wrong, and she sees herself as the pinnacle of what a person should be. She will say terrible things to me, and there was never a punishment that matched the offense. Every shortcoming was punished harshly, but the follow-through was never consistent. The first memory that stands out in my mind was Mother's Day when I was 6 or 7. I genuinely wanted to help my mother in every way that day. But when it came time to cook dinner, I wasn't doing everything exactly her way, so she screamed at me to get out and drove me to tears. Once I hit puberty, it got so much worse. My mom definitely has some form of eating disorder, and so did her mother. The first words she said to me when I got my period were that I couldn't eat like a kid anymore. When my body started changing and I put on 5 pounds, my mom started me on diets. She would watch everything I ate closely, so naturally I became obsessive over food. On one occasion, I took a cookie at a Christmas party, and she saw me eating it, ripped it out of my hands in front of people. I snuck another one. She caught me and proceeded to throw a handful of cookies at me and call me names in front of my friends. She would make me get on a scale every week, and if I gained weight, she would ground me or take something away. It wasn't long until I developed severe bulimia. She still denies having anything to do with it, despite lingering damage to my heart and stomach. When I lost a friend to suicide, she told me I was full of it for being upset, but agreed to take me to see a therapist anyway. I didn't fully realize how bad it was until I finally started saying it out loud. I'd like to think I've gotten past it, but the thought of having a child terrifies me because I'm scared I'll become my mother. Story 12. My sister's 3 years older than me. I have always known there was something fundamentally and permanently wrong with her. She has been a cruel bully her whole life. When I was a kid, my parents used to say all 3 of us sisters would get along when we were adults, but I knew she would never be normal or nice. As a kid, I would have just said she was mean. Now I would say she has narcissistic personality disorder. She hasn't been on speaking terms with our other sister for several years because she punched her in the face in the middle of a crowded museum full of families and children about an hour before my dad was scheduled to propose to my stepmom in the diamond exhibit. She was in her 20s when this happened. She slaps her husband in the face for things like not having directions pulled up quickly enough on his phone or spilling tea on the kitchen floor. She has never had a job, and her husband has been supporting her financially since they graduated from college almost 10 years ago. She once threw her husband out of the house that he pays for and made him get a studio apartment so she could live alone while she dated other people. He wasn't allowed to see anyone else during this time. She posted pictures of him online, telling everyone how much she adored him. I only knew the truth because a friend of mine found her dating profile. She told me how she was such a victim in the relationship because her husband was worthless, even though he works to pay for everything while she does nothing around the house. She cut me out of her life with no explanation shortly after I got pregnant. It's obvious to me it's because I was taking attention away from her while she was getting sympathy from the family over her alleged infertility. For as far back as I can remember, she has taken anything she wanted from me or our other sister. As a teenager, she once took new underwear I had bought with my own money and laughed when I asked about it. She once poured a teapot over my mother's head. When I planned my small courthouse wedding because I was pregnant, she tried to take over the planning. The night before the wedding, she wanted me to wake up an hour earlier for something she wouldn't even explain. I refused, and she was still upset the next morning, making my wedding day about her unhappiness. I found out later she immediately went to my dad and told him her version of events. When we were very young, she told me and my other sister to get in a box because our parents didn't want us anymore and were sending us away. We believed her and were crying until our parents found us. One Christmas when she was about 14, she disliked all her presents and complained the whole day, upsetting my parents. She once slapped me at Thanksgiving in front of extended family because she didn't like the subject of my story. Story 13. I don't think my brother is a sociopath, but he definitely has serious anger issues and a side nobody likes to see. I recall when I was little, around 6, and he would have been 9 or 10, he would take his cologne, tell me it was spray candy, but that I could only have some if I let him spray it, and then he'd spray the cologne down my throat. I also remember several times when we would be playing by taking turns rolling each other in a big blanket, and he would roll my head up in it, tie a rope around me so I couldn't move, and then press a pillow against my face so I couldn't breathe. Many times I almost drowned in pools because he would hold me underwater for so long. The worst part is that my parents never did anything to help. But I would get in trouble for a lot of things he actually did. To be honest, I've suppressed most of my childhood memories and only remember them when someone else brings them up. But I do remember how intense his bullying could be, how he would keep going until I cried, and then keep going even more. He would always set me up to get in trouble for things. So many times he pushed me so far that I'd finally snap and yell back, only for my parents to yell at me and punish me instead. In all honesty, I really think he is what pushed me into developing anorexia and bulimia. When I really knew he must have had deeper issues was seeing how mad he could get over the simplest things. If you accidentally broke a cheap item of his, like a $5 pair of earphones, he would yell for an hour about it and then be angry with you for several days. Once, a group of guys decided to beat him up. It was 5 against 1, and up to that point, this was the only fight he had ever lost. He was already furious about that, but then he saw that one of the other guys had a firearm on him legally during the fight. The guy never pulled it out or threatened him, but anytime we bring up this incident, even years later, my brother says things like, he should have taken the gun and used it, or pulled out his pocket knife and stabbed him. He has also said that he wanted to hurt his ex many times, including when they were together, though he says he restrained himself. The only thing that keeps me from thinking he is a complete psychopath is the fact that he loves dogs, absolutely adores them. I also remember him crying one time about 6 years ago. That's the only time I've ever seen him cry in the 16 years I've been alive. So yes, he has some serious problems, but I don't know what they are. I hated him for these things when I was younger, but now my heart just breaks for him anytime I hear him getting so angry or when I think about the things he's done. I wish I could hate him, but I just can't. All I can imagine is the life he could have had if he had never been this way. Nothing's worse than having someone you love be so cruel and so lost. Story 14. My parents first noticed something when I was very young, around 3. I wouldn't let anyone but my mom touch me, not out of fear, but more because I hated them touching me. I bit and hit my dad and siblings dozens of times just for coming too close. I would fly into a rage if they upset me. My rages have been a constant in my life. When I was younger, I would sometimes pass out after calming down because of the sheer energy I had spent. A few times I even coughed blood after screaming so loudly. The police were called multiple times because of those incidents. But that was just me as an over-emotional child. The abnormal stuff isn't just that. I used to put my hands around my younger sister's neck when she cried to make her stop, and I would pick her up by the neck. When she was being carried by mom or dad, I would draw attention back to myself by digging my fingernails into her ankles or feet and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world if she cried or screamed. I actually got a rush from it. Not in the way you laugh at a comedy, but more like a disturbing sense of power. I can't remember the first time I threatened her or my older sister with a knife, but I do remember the last. My older sister, 3 years older, was crouched in the corner, crying and begging me not to hurt her, while I stood over her, laughing and yelling about how easily I could hurt her, holding the sharpest knife I could find. I was 14 at the time, now 17. I truly intended to harm her. Maybe worse. The rush of power made me feel completely manic. I have never felt like that outside of situations like this. When I was 7, I stabbed my little sister, 5, in the chest with a pair of safety scissors. I went for the chest because that's where the heart is, and that's what you learn controls life. I genuinely wanted her gone in that moment. The sternum stopped it from being worse. When I was even younger, I hurt our cat, squeezing her until she cried out, holding her tightly around the neck until she gasped, pressing her face down and squeezing her feet so she would let out muffled cries. Once I went too far and dislocated her shoulder. Luckily, she has no lasting issues. I feel sick typing this now. I knew what I did was wrong, but the power over an innocent animal's pain or comfort felt intoxicating in a way that made me hate myself. The thing that sets me apart from others who act like this is the guilt. I can't explain it without describing what happened when it hit me. When I threatened my older sister all the times, but I remember the last most. As soon as I snapped out of it, I was horrified. I immediately started crying and screaming, pulling my hair, and hurting myself with the knife. No punishment felt like enough. I would have seriously injured myself if my older sister hadn't intervened. After I stabbed my little sister and saw the blood, I screamed for my parents, sobbed, tried to hug her, and tried to scratch my own skin off. Every time I ever hurt my cat, I would cry for ages afterwards, sometimes hurting myself by slamming against walls, cutting myself, or burning my skin. I would then be so gentle with her for a long time after. I know this doesn't erase what I did. It was like there were two different people inside me. Now I tell myself I have to be the good me all the time, because she loves me now and comes to me instead of running away. I don't want to betray that. My sisters and I have a better relationship now that I'm on medication and in therapy for my outbursts, but they are much closer to each other than to me. This hurts, but I understand. When I was the antagonist in their lives, they depended on each other. My little sister is quiet, anxious, and avoids conflict now, and I know I contributed to that. She forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. My mood swings and occasional lack of empathy still hurt my social relationships. I become obsessive and overly attached, or I don't care at all. There is no middle ground. My feelings of hatred and love feel similar, and I often feel both toward the same person. I know I need help for this because it's still happening, but my therapy was suspended and replaced with a specialized eating disorder program. They want me to gain more weight, even though I don't meet the criteria for anorexia anymore, and I feel like it's making my body image worse. That's another battle entirely. Story 15. My brother, who is 9 years older than me, has tried to kill me at least twice. Once, when I was a baby, he calmly and quietly took me from my high chair, carried me across the street to the school, and proceeded to dangle me by my ankle over a 3-story fire escape to see what happened. Then when I was 23, I was working with him for a few months. He constantly insulted me, my intelligence, I'm much smarter than him, my relationships, and my life in general. For 3 months until I couldn't take it anymore and broke down. While we were working on a job site, I told him I couldn't work with him anymore, and he took a survey stake and stabbed me in the chest with it. He had been aiming for my throat and missed by about half an inch. I didn't talk to him for almost 2 years until he begged and pleaded for me to accept his apology by giving me hockey tickets. I haven't truly forgiven him, and his kids are unpleasant, but he treats me nicely enough now that I can fake it for the sake of our family. Story 16. I don't think my sister is a sociopath, but she has had moments where she seemed to switch into a state of pathological viciousness. If anything, she might have borderline personality disorder. When I was about 8 or 9, I went into the backyard, filled our kiddie pool with water, and lay there splashing around. My sister, 10 or 11 years old, took a drinking glass, filled it with the hottest water from the tap, casually walked up behind me, and poured it on my back. I screamed and begged her to stop. She laughed. At least she didn't boil it, so it didn't blister my skin, but it was hot enough to feel like a sudden, bad sunburn had exploded over my back. I dunked my back in the cold water until the sting went away. Then she did it again. I screamed more, and this time as she poured it over me, I spun around to try to get away, so it covered my back and stomach. She just walked away, laughing and smiling. My brother also recently told me about a time when he, 8 or 9 at the time, my sister was 12 or 13, had a bizarre bullying experience with her. He had said, "I thought middle schoolers only had 5 class periods a day." My sister started cackling and shouting, "We have 7 class periods." Her reaction was strange enough, but worse was how she kept repeating it at him over and over. She wouldn't stop. He eventually ran into a nearby bathroom, locked himself inside and cried while she followed him, still shouting. While he was in the bathroom, my sister made several dozen photocopies of her school schedule and began stuffing the copies under the bathroom door, shrieking with laughter. My brother says her piercing, banshee-like cackle almost scared him. Even now, as a 36-year-old woman, she sometimes laughs that way, and he says it always takes him back to when he was hiding in that bathroom. Needless to say, our parents were oblivious, rationalizing it as normal sibling rivalry. In the end, she only became more bizarre and unpredictable, to the point of almost strangling me a few years ago. We don't know what to make of it, except that it might be a symptom of brain damage related to her childhood epilepsy. Story 17. Not sure if this applies or not, but here's what I can tell you about my older sister. She's always been self-absorbed and self-centered. I was always the first person to call her out on her behavior, so naturally we fought a lot. She got pregnant and had a son about 3 years ago. She left an abusive boyfriend and moved in with my parents. Everyone helped care for the baby, but she refused to help. After a while, other family members began to notice what I had already known. She was an alcoholic with drug problems, had extreme mood swings, once even trying to fight my younger brother, and was a hardcore narcissist. Just 10 days after giving birth, she was back to drinking heavily. Once, she tried to breastfeed while drunk. We stopped her and explained why it was wrong, but she argued it wasn't a big deal and wouldn't affect the baby. My parents suspect she drank during pregnancy, though she won't admit it. Eventually, she began finding ways to make everyone argue. She manipulated people in the worst ways, creating so many problems for my parents. It wasn't practical to have her in the house, angry and unhelpful, while they were raising her son. Whenever my mom told her the baby needed to be changed or fed, she acted helpless or told someone else to do it. Whenever we tried to teach her how to care for him, she ignored us or locked herself in her room. She wouldn't bathe her baby, but her makeup was always perfect. About 4 months after the baby was born, she left. She went back to her abusive boyfriend and didn't take her son with her. She didn't even try. She abandoned her baby. My parents raise him now, and he will be turning 3 in June. She has only visited 3 or 4 times since she left. It's sad, but narcissistic people sometimes aren't good parents. They can't truly care for anyone but themselves. I don't have a good relationship with my sister because I believe she isn't a good person. She tries to make people believe she has changed, but she still makes no effort to support her son in any way. Story 18. I had a narcissistic mother and a narcissistic sister. I was 3 years older, and I noticed from the very start that my sister was not normal. She would throw toys out of her crib all the time, and my mother would force me to give them back to her. Every single time she would pull my hair. When she learned how to walk, she started biting me hard. "Oh, she's so much smaller than you. You have no right to complain," my mother would say every time. After that, she started throwing hardwood toys at my head. Whenever I tried to make a friend, which was rare, she would scare them away, stabbing them with pens or making loud, disruptive noises when they were near. As she got older, she and my mother worked together to steal my money and sabotage anything I tried to do. She probably caused my allergy to perfume by spraying it constantly in my room, many different perfumes at once, so much that you could see clouds of perfume droplets in the air. When I moved back home briefly at 17 because I had a job, she played loud music every single night until I moved out again. When she found out I was pregnant, she kicked me in the stomach and screamed, "I hope you have a miscarriage, you disgusting person." Story 19. My younger brother and I used to be best friends. Inseparable. We spent every summer day together, late into the night, smoking, discovering new music, watching funny shows, making each other laugh, and having great conversations. That all changed when my parents kicked me out of the house for defending him over some small issue. In reality, my mother had it out for me, and this was just a convenient excuse, since I had somewhere to stay at my university. I had just gotten a puppy, and when I was kicked out, I couldn't see him. Anyone who has raised a dog knows that the puppy stage is short. Every day I was away broke my heart. I told my parents, and I begged my brother to come visit and bring the puppy. He said my parents wouldn't allow it, and he didn't visit. I told him I cried every night about the time I was losing, time I could never get back. Sometimes he promised to come the next day, but every time, he flaked with an excuse. I even asked him to let me in the side gate after our parents went to bed so I could just pet the puppy. Still, he refused. About a month later, I patched things up with my parents and moved back in, only to learn that my mother had been encouraging him to visit me with the puppy the whole time. He just didn't feel like it. After that, I started noticing other things I had ignored. I often gave him money when he had no job, covering most of our summer activities, while he was also stealing cash from where I kept it hidden. We only ever did what he wanted to do, and when I suggested something, he would rather be alone than compromise. Whenever my mom went after me and my dad sided with her, he never defended me, despite all the times I had defended him. Later, I realized he uses people when it's convenient, and once they're not in his immediate orbit, he doesn't care. He's manipulative, pushy, and self-serving. Now that I've stopped visiting my parents after a falling out, he hasn't once seen me or his niece, even though we live just 20 minutes apart. He continues to live at home, well into his 20s, doing nothing for anyone but himself. Yet in my parents' eyes, he's the good child. Story 20. My older sister definitely fits one of these categories. I remember her being mean and cruel toward our parents at a young age. When she was a teenager, she dated a guy who eventually moved in with us because of problems with his family. The moment I really realized something was wrong with her was when they had a fight in our basement. She was screaming at him and acting out of control. We had a pool table, and she started picking up pool balls and throwing them at him while he stood there crying. When he tried to cover his face, she ordered him to put his hands down. And he did. She kept pelting him until there were no balls left. My friend and I watched in shock. Since then, she's done terrible things, like ruining my mom's perfect credit by not paying back a $5,000 loan my mom co-signed, then guilting her into giving more money by threatening to keep her granddaughter away. There are too many stories like this. I could write a book about what she's done. Story 21. I only realized my sister is a narcissist a couple of years ago. I knew she was abusive and a liar, but when I moved to another country about a decade ago, I didn't understand narcissism. I just knew she liked to start fights, lie about what happened, and never apologize. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, I didn't think much about it, except to be upset. It wasn't until I returned to visit after 10 years away, 10 years of living among normal, respectful people, that I saw clearly. She pulled the same behavior as always, but now I knew what to expect from normal people, and her actions stood out even more. She nearly ruined my visit and my mother's visit with our aunt, whom she hadn't seen in years. But now I know exactly what she is. I will never again put myself in a situation with her where I can't simply leave the moment she starts insulting people, taking offense over nothing, emotionally manipulating, or twisting events with lies. Story 22. When my two older sisters were 15 and 17, my oldest sister, 17, was dating the guy who would later become her oldest son's father. I knew my oldest sister wasn't normal when she started accusing her 19-year-old boyfriend and my other sister of having an inappropriate interest in each other, or claiming he was attracted to my other sister simply because he offered her a ride to school instead of her having to walk for miles. This was literally because my mom had the only car and used it for work, odd errands, or her own personal life. But that's a story for another time. My other sister got most of my oldest sister's wrath because she couldn't handle sharing attention and everything had to be about her. I remember her making fun of my other sister's less developed body in front of our older brother's friends. My oldest sister ruined my other sister's high school graduation and her wedding. She didn't even invite her to either of her own weddings. I was much younger at the time, so I didn't get the worst of it for many years. But as I got older and became a successful adult, I eventually became a target too. She is honestly the most jealous and hateful person I have ever met. Story 23. Not my sibling, but my father and my stepmother. I only started to realize the full extent of it as an adult after moving back home and spending time around him again. As a kid, he was abusive, physically, mentally, emotionally. I've shared some of my experiences with him before, so I won't go into much detail here. Long story short, he was a monster in private, while publicly he was seen as a pillar of morality, a respected doctor, and an all-around stand-up guy. It was like there was a switch in his head. If anyone was around to see, he acted like the perfect gentleman, and as soon as there were no witnesses, it switched off with even the slightest provocation. For the longest time, I figured he was just a typical abusive parent, maybe with a dose of narcissism and delusion. The tipping point was during a trip last fall when I asked him about how he treated me as a kid. His reaction was almost total bewilderment, as if it had never occurred to him that his behavior could have been memorable, or as if he had selectively forgotten it. The uncanny and disturbingly natural way he responded made my skin crawl. More recently, I've moved back to the area, and he's started asking to spend time with me. At first, I thought I might as well. Maybe I get a free meal now and then, and if things turn sour, I could just walk away since I'm completely independent now. It's during these recent evenings together that I've started to realize there's more to him than I thought. He's just off. As a kid and even as a teenager, I never had a baseline for normal, so his behavior seemed ordinary to me. But now the little things stand out. Nothing new, just all the old patterns I used to excuse as he's just an abuser or he's a narcissist suddenly have a common thread. He genuinely doesn't see them as bad, wrong, or unusual. If I weren't independent, it would honestly scare me. The only person he really has left in his life is his second wife, a woman my entire family, and her own daughter, my stepsister, finds just as unsettling as I find my dad. There's a long-standing suspicion in our family that she may have caused her first husband's death by tampering with his car. He had money, he was losing it, and they'd been fighting constantly. Then one morning, the brakes on his brand new, less than a month-old car failed catastrophically on his way to work. She played the grieving widow for about 3 months, then started dating my recently divorced dad. She went from too distraught to leave the house to cheerful and laughing at all his jokes almost overnight. She has the same switch my dad does, sweet and charming in public, then cold and calculating the moment we're alone with her. They married within a few years, and now that they're comfortable, my dad has stopped pretending around her. She, on the other hand, keeps up the public act, but recently she's drawn attention again. She took out a large life insurance policy on my dad, despite him already having more than enough coverage, no risky hobbies, and a safe job. Then she encouraged him to buy a small sailboat and start taking it out alone on the open ocean, something he's happily done since he misses the larger boat he had when married to my mom. The rest of us have already guessed what might happen, and none of us will be surprised if my dad goes missing or dies in a boating accident. As far as we're concerned, they entirely deserve each other. Story 24. My mother used to keep one of those big water jugs in her room filled with change and $1 and $5 bills. For Christmas, I was extremely young at the time, couldn't have been older than 6, when I walked in on my sister taking money from the jar. I didn't really understand the concept of money yet, but I knew it was important and earned. My sister told me it was okay, so I took $1 and kept it for a while, but I felt bad and eventually put it back. She kept taking money from my mother and even got my friend involved. He was a grade older than me, and my sister was 13. He told her it was okay too, but he knew it was wrong and ended up taking around $10. I remember we rented Smash Brothers, Melee, played it a lot, and bought candy. Eventually, my mother noticed the jar getting lighter. She put it on our dining room table and, without me knowing, left a note saying that if someone came forward, we wouldn't be in trouble, but that Christmas wouldn't be very good if it continued. My friend and I walked in, and he saw the jar. He suggested we take some, but I said no. Then my sister walked out of the dining room and recorded him saying that on her iPod. I knew she had been stealing most of my mom's money, but she just played the recording anyway, and from that moment, I didn't trust her. My friend couldn't do much. He was caught. My sister eventually moved out of state and is coming home for my high school graduation next week. Now I have my own savings jar, and I can't trust her near my money. She never felt remorse and continued stealing from my mom. My mom doesn't know, but I do, and I kept it from her for a long time. She stole from my mom again later, which eventually contributed to the foreclosure of the house I grew up in. She's not a very good person. Story 25. Not my sibling, but my cousin. We grew up like sisters, living in the same neighborhood and going to school together. We were best friends. She was always a little selfish, being an only child, but her behavior worsened as we finished high school. She felt slighted by anything that hurt her ego. If she felt judged, she became bitter and spiteful. She surrounded herself with acquaintances, treating them like close friends while abandoning long-term ones. Once, the two of us and 2 lifelong friends made plans to hang out. We talked about it every day leading up to it. On the day, she never showed. We called and texted, worried, until we saw her pull into her driveway down the street. We realized she had blown us off. She texted saying she fell asleep and forgot. Then my boyfriend texted me. He had just seen her with 2 other girls at the pizza place where he worked. Annoyed, I texted her, "If you wanted to cancel, you could have said so. No hard feelings." She exploded, accusing us of judging her for drinking we hadn't known and saying we were jealous of her other friends. We told her it wasn't about the drinking, it was about lying. She then dredged up past mistakes we'd made and told us we had no right to judge. Later, she told her 2 new friends how awful we were, and they started openly mocking us on social media. What stuck with me most was how she didn't even bother to hide it. She went to my boyfriend's workplace, hung out nearby, and assumed we wouldn't call her out. Her ego is so big she either didn't care or didn't think we'd notice. If you give her an inch, she will take a mile, and if you question her, she'll cut you off and blame you for it. We're no longer close, and it breaks my heart, but I can't have toxic people in my life. Story 26. My brother has been officially diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy. We grew up together until our parents divorced. He chose to live with our dad while I stayed with our mom. He was 15 at the time, and I was 8. By the time I moved in with my dad later, my brother had already moved out. Our mom has her own mental health issues, which might be where my brother gets it from. Dad told me stories about him getting into fights at school due to his temper. Once, he and my dad argued about Dad's wife at the time. She wasn't a good person. During the argument, Dad grabbed my brother's shirt, and my brother thought he was going to be hit, so he struck first. In Dad's words, "The boy hit me, and I just saw stars." They wrestled until Dad pulled several muscles and was bedridden for 3 days. My brother later apologized, explaining why he reacted that way, and they made up. That's the only time he's ever gotten violent with family. But friends later told me that in fights, even ones others started, he was completely merciless, silent, and relentless. He later joined the military for several years and recently got out after being injured. That's when he told me he was a sociopath and explained what it meant. I didn't believe him at first. He's the nicest guy you could meet. His wife, friends, family, and fellow soldiers all love him. He would go out of his way to help people. Then one night, after he had been drinking at a party, I sat with him, and he told me stories. How he held a dying friend but didn't really care, or watched someone he had just spoken to get killed and didn't react. He explained the rules he imposes on himself to blend in with people. It was chilling to watch the warmth leave his face, replaced by something cold and calculating. And then, just like that, he slipped the mask back on. I love him deeply, and I know in his own way he loves me too. But I realize now it might only be because it's one of his self-imposed rules. And I didn't understand that until he told me. He's the nicest sociopath you'll ever meet. Story 27. My older brother, 2 years my senior, has always been a difficult person to deal with. I can't point to a single defining moment that showed me exactly how bad it could get, but I can recall several incidents that have stayed with me. When I was a toddler, he had one of those battery-powered toy Jeeps. I wandered over to inspect it, curious, but instead of letting me look, he threw a tantrum, shoved me away, and then deliberately ran me over with it. Another time, we both received Pokemon skateboards as gifts. One day he left his on the street and a car ran over it. He spent the rest of the day furious, blaming me for not helping clean up our toys. Later, when he saw me playing with my skateboard in the backyard, he tried to take it from me. When I resisted, he yanked it out of my hands so forcefully that my fingers were cut and bleeding. Then he hit me over the head with it, breaking it in the process. Long before that incident, I got a Game Boy and Pokemon Gold for my 5th birthday. Nearly every day after, he would try to take it from me. If I didn't hand it over immediately, he would hit me until I gave in, and sometimes kept hitting me even after I threw it to him. Most of the terrible things he's done have been directed at me, and in a strange way, I'm relieved it was me instead of someone else. Oddly enough, I've always been taller and physically stronger than him. He's actually a foot shorter than me. But because of that, our parents and other adults never believed me when I told them what was happening. Their only advice was something like, "If he's hitting you, hit him back." That was never an option I could bring myself to take, except in a few rare extreme situations. Story 28. My sister has a diagnosed personality disorder, so I know some of her actions are beyond her control. Still, she refuses any help available because our father enables her behavior. Realistically, she should be in an adult group home and working regularly with a therapist. Instead, thanks to our father's constant support, she lives alone. He drives her wherever she needs to go, and he shields her from consequences. When our father was diagnosed with cancer in December, the year before last, it was terrifying for all of us. At first, we didn't know how serious it was, and we were deeply worried for his health. But my sister's reaction went beyond fear for him. She was also terrified of losing the person who made her current lifestyle possible. She knew that if something happened to him, she would either have to support herself, which she's never been able to do, or move into a group home. Rather than face either reality, she attempted to take her own life. Just a few days after learning that our father might be gravely ill, we were sitting in a hospital room, listening to a doctor explain how she had taken a dangerously large amount of pills. She lay there sedated with a tube down her throat. It crushed our dad emotionally, and the rest of us were shocked and overwhelmed. I pushed for her to move into a group home once she recovered, but both she and my father refused. Instead of focusing on his cancer treatment and recovery, Dad continued to care for her, while she frequently had emotional breakdowns over his illness. Fortunately, Dad's treatment ended successfully this past January, and he's doing very well now. Unfortunately, nothing has changed with my sister. She's still fully dependent on him, and neither of them see a problem with their arrangement or are willing to change it. Story 29. My little brother would probably say I was a sociopath, sheer narcissist growing up. Extreme violence was part of my life from very early. My parents often fought each other physically, my 5 feet 1 inch mom being equally, if not more terrifying, than my 6 feet 4 inch father. Both have mental issues, my mom being bipolar, and my father most definitely having narcissistic personality disorder. After watching people run over each other with cars, strangle each other with clothing, my mother climb on cabinets to get a better angle to launch a knife attack on my father's face, and countless hours of screaming, inflicting similar torture on my little brother seemed normal to me. In kindergarten, I lured a kid into a sand tunnel and climbed over it to collapse it, leaving her buried and hoping she would die. In the hallway, I was shoved aside by an older kid running to get to the bus, so I caught up to him and shoved him from behind hard enough into the metal door that he broke his front teeth. I stepped over his bleeding face and calmly took my seat on the bus. At lunch, a kid bought an orange soda, my favorite, and when he refused to give it to me, I bit my arm very hard and started screaming that he did it. We were escorted to the principal's office, where I watched him get paddled while I drank his soda. When I was older, my brother and I fought constantly. I remember sitting on him, holding him by the ears and slamming his head into the ground until he passed out. I dragged his body and piled him behind a recliner so no one would notice. I tried drowning him in a river. I tied him to a tree in the woods and left him there as a game. I strangled him a dozen times, and we both have knife scars from fighting each other. I never tortured animals. I've always loved them and foster dozens of kittens a year. Animals never hurt me, so I gravitated toward them. I wouldn't say I don't have empathy. I'm actually very good at interpreting others' emotions. But I'm not very sympathetic toward people and have been accused of being cold and heartless. Really, I think most people are just very weak mentally. I escaped my parents' abuse and the Sewell abuse by others later on, and in my teens experimented with every mind-expanding drug I could get. I still smoke pot most days. I think between the pot and sheer willpower to stay aware of myself, I've managed to become the sane, stable, normal one. I'm married to a loving person, and we have one amazing, non-traumatized child. I have no relationship with anyone in my family, including my little brother, for obvious reasons. My disorder was the direct result of intense childhood trauma. Death threats, beatings, being burned with cigarettes, ambulance rides in the middle of the night, police rides to CPS, doors kicked in, heavy objects thrown, being kidnapped and left with strangers, foster homes, broken glass, broken mirrors, and so much blood were normal in my earliest memories. As happy as I am most of the time, I still have a deep well of rage and would love to push the button that ended humanity for good. Story 30. My mother and my brother are narcissists. I've gone no contact to escape them because of their abuse and now live in Europe with my SO. Since this is about siblings, I'll focus on my brother. I realized he was a narcissist after his girlfriend at the time asked me if he cheated on her. He had. He called me the night it happened, admitted it, and asked me not to tell. I told him I couldn't promise that if she came to me. She did. After I told her, he ruined my life. At work, he physically bullied me and manipulated everyone, including our managers, into believing I was a horrible person who would destroy them if given the chance. He told anyone who would listen how I lied, always in a way that made him seem the victim. He went as far as disowning me in front of everyone, with full support from all my coworkers. That's how far his manipulation went. He was also stealing tips from servers. He's an active drug addict, and framed me. He turned all my friends against me and didn't speak to me for 6 months, all to maintain a huge lie. He still denies it. The best part? The girl he cheated with was my good friend. She admitted everything and tried confronting him several times. His response was always, What are you talking about? We're great friends, I would never do that. I sought help for myself. I'm in therapy, take medication, and I'm not in denial about my depression, anxiety, PTSD, or my addiction. I've been sober almost 2 years now. That's just one light example of the torture of my childhood. The physical, psychological, and verbal abuse. Being under a narcissist's control your entire life is terrifying. It's like your life was a script written for you, where you exist only to serve them. When the script is ripped apart, you're forced to start over, discover who you are, and learn what real life is like. My brother and mom were bad people. I don't miss them. I'll never know what it's like to have a real family, but I'm okay with that because I'm free now. I have an SO who loves me and shows me unconditional love. He doesn't punish me for dropping something, telling the truth, opening up about my feelings, or sharing what I want to do that day. He's showing me what normality is, something children from narcissistic households never knew or understood. Story 31. My brother isn't as extreme as some examples I've heard, but he's definitely incapable of empathy. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment I realized something was off about him. Growing up, I didn't have many friends, so my perspective on what counted as reasonable behavior was limited. In hindsight, he never showed strong emotions except anger and embarrassment. The only time I remember him crying in 18 years of growing up together was when he lost a game, and even then, it was out of rage and humiliation, not sadness. I remember being around 10 years old. He would have been about 13 when he hit me and then lied about it to our parents. He looked me straight in the eyes and swore I was making it up. It's hard to explain how unsettling that was, but what made it worse was that he never showed any remorse. He had 3 distinct laughs, a genuine one when he found something truly funny, a fake one he used around other people, and this awful snorting laugh through his nose whenever someone else was in pain, struggling, or failing. It was like other people's misfortune amused him. Now he works for Google and earns a 6-figure salary. That's just how life goes sometimes.